Oh, all right, ladies and gentlemen, let's very quickly. Last week, I'm just going to give you a few highlights. I know there are other places where I want you to chime in, so remain unmuted. But we're looking back at what would have occurred or what occurred on last week. And Green, I need you to move. Okay. I need you to move, screen. Well, Samuel, on last week, with David and his men, they returned from rescuing their families from the Amalekites. And it was that young Amalekite that arrived on the scene from the battle at Mount Gilboa. And in his hands, he carried the crown and that armband of Saul. Perhaps he was thinking he was going to be commended, rewarded. He had that kind of braggadocious attitude. And David and his men, as a result of that conversation that they heard, David and his men rent their clothes. They went into grief mode. They mourned. They wept. They fasted for a period of time for Saul, his sons, the army, for the house of Israel. And then David had the man slain. David, toward the end of the chapter, composed a song. And it's written in a book called the Book of Jasper. And it's in memory of Saul and his connection with Jonathan. He grieved for Jonathan, his brother. And the ache is a term of, your heart aches, a term of affection. And if I miss something, please chime in. Does that pretty much sum what you worked on last week?
Yeah, and then Pastor Gary also talked about the lineage of the Amalekites. So he mentioned that as well. But yes, that's a good summary.
Okay, all righty. And what I'm attempting to do is to move my screen. It appears to...
You may want to consider stop sharing.
Stop sharing. Okay, pause. Stop share. Pull it up again. No. Share screen again. Let's go with this. Share and slideshow. Okay, there you go. So last week's lesson. Now, doing something just a tad bit different today, but I want you all to look at the screen because these are questions that we'll be discussing. We have to remember the past in order to prepare for our future. And in reading this chapter, as well as having read Samuel, I know that prayer has played a significant role in these books. Book of First Samuel and in this book. We're going to talk about steps that you take before and after inquiring of the Lord. Think about the grief. That grief has a way of changing a person's perspective on life, personally, physically. Can you hear me? Am I okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. What does it actually change? Question, how did David deal with the next phase of his life? What do you think David learned about himself, about his expectations, knowing that he had been anointed from a youth, about his relationship with God? Making a move. We all do it. We all have to make moves in our life, and sometimes those moves can be very daunting. Whether it's to a new job, home, preparing for retirement after 30 years, getting married, raising children. The list is endless. How do you prepare? What does the Lord tell you as you prepare to make a move? How do you handle it? What new challenges did you think of or not think of as a result? What opposition stands in your way? What is your strategy? Because we all have to have one. We all have to have some direction. But how do you come up with those strategies? Do you go to others before you talk to the Lord? Now, those are questions. Do you feel you're physically up for the challenge, up for the task? And then can you think of anything that we have today in our world that David didn't have? So I just ended up with more questions than I had answers. And I knew that you all would help me teach this lesson today by focusing on many of these things. Make sense? I hope it does. Moving right along. Okay. Moving. Okay, escape. Then did it to escape.
Let's just do the same process.
Hit escape. Oh, pause. Okay. Stop. Share. What's that one? There. Okay, here we go. Not moving. Not moving. Okay. Well, let's read the scripture. Someone would be so kind as to start reading 2 Samuel, verse 1 through 4. Someone else read 5 through 8 till I can resume my screen. Please.
I'll read the first
Begin.
4.
Thank you.
Yep, and I'm reading out of the New Living Translation. After this, David asked the Lord, should I move back to one of the towns of Judah? Yes, the Lord replied. Then David asked, which town should I go to? To Hebron, the Lord answered. David's 2 wives were Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel. So David and his wives and his men and their families all moved to Judah, and they settled in the villages near Hebron. Then the men of Judah came to David and anointed him king over the people of Judah.
All right, thank you.
Yep, and I would just leave it in this view, Cheryl. That makes it easy.
Okay. All right, thank you. You read 1 through 4.
Yes, I did.
Okay. I've moved to a map because we have David, and with the help of Abiathar, the chief priest. You all remember him? Mm-hmm. Do you remember Abiathar? One of the priests?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember, you all remember the story of the 85 priests that were slain? Mm-hmm. Well, Abiathar survived, and he will be working closely with David. And it was in the research, my understanding that David sought guidance, although David was assured to hear from the Lord about what he would do next. So in this first verse, this is David having grieved, and it now at a point where he needs to move. It happened in the course of time, or sometime later, that he consulted or inquired of the Lord. It really means something to ask inquire of the Lord, whether you just go into prayer, whether you fast, whether you, really go in sackcloth and ashes regarding a matter. But this is what David did. David sought the Lord. And as we get older and we prepare for new movement, the reality is we still want to enjoy life. We still want to live a life, coin a phrase, like it's golden. But we got to talk to the Lord about how to get through to where we perceive ourselves going, what he might have for us. And David was no different. He sought the Lord and asked and received an answer. Where do I go? Go to Hebron. So David, wives, the men in his camp, that's where they went. What do you all know about Hebron? Now, before Hebron, David and his household, where were they residing?
They were living in the Palestinian area.
And the name of that Palestinian area was Ziklag, correct?
Hmm?
Okay, what do we know about Hebron? What kind of land is Hebron? I have a little map here. There you see Hebron, Kingdom of Judah. Okay, there's Jerusalem up to the north. Moab to the right. Edom down at the bottom. Kingdom of Israel up above further. Samaria and Jaffa and Shechem. So what do we know about Hebron? What kind of land was it? I asked the question, was the land flat, hilly? Was it mountainous? What's the significance of that? God gave him the okay to go there. What would make Hebron a great place to settle in? David and his family. Type in if you
based on the map itself, and in that time, I know that a lot of the area was hilly, but I'm also thinking that it was fertile ground because it's right there by whatever body of water that is. So that would seem to me to indicate that the land was probably pretty fertile.
That is correct. Olives and vines, and it offered a great deal. It was a metropolis area and very rich region in Judea, and it was famed for its fruit, its excellent water. Travelers, they had great springs there in Hebron. And it's also a city of the priests. Which is a great connection because there are men of God there. And the area in itself is also a place where there were sepulchres, graves of the patriots. And Hebron was important. The land, hilly, they went up in a mountainous area. What would be the significance of David and his household going up as opposed to remaining flat? On a flattened, in a area where the land is more flattened. Anything stand out in your mind about that?
Would it be like to hide him or to protect him to a certain degree?
Yes, ma'am. Exactly. They would be able to see if they were being attacked. They would have an edge by being up, elevated. And so, yeah, that is a That is one of the answers. Anyone else? What's really nice about, wonderful about David inquiring, we see that the idea of prayer, that David is not just acting like he did before. Remember when David went to Gath? How maybe somewhat out of character he acted. He wasn't granted permission to do what he did. He went alone, he acted quickly and he made mistakes. But when you inquire of the Lord, you act differently. And he knew to inquire of the Lord before making a move. Saul is dead, his son. One son we'll learn about remains. But his sons are now slain. Saul is no longer a threat. David's been hunted for years, living in and out of caves, trying to survive, trying to be 1 step, 2 steps ahead of Saul, survive. And yet, he was always protected. Always protected. There we go. All righty. So this was a must do. Seek the Lord, get an answer. And he did receive the specifics from the Lord. Do any of you sense that David wanted God's exact will for his life? You think he just, he was a man after God's own heart, but what indicates that he really wanted the specific direction from the Lord?
He kept asking. It literally starts with, should I move back to one of the towns? Yep. And the fact, yep is pretty vague.
Right.
David
talks about,
yeah,
he could go anywhere, but now remember, direction, and he knows that the throne is going to be his. Is he moving too quickly? No. He is methodical. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Being very methodical, very strategic. One of the things that I'm asking about strategy. When we have to make decisions, when we have to know that we know that we know that we know, it's imperative that, Lord, you got to show me, you got to help me know how to do this, which way to turn. God will meet us at every turn of the road. He really will. But it's so much better when we're meeting him, having inquired, having asked, having sought his face. So God's way, getting there by God's way is the best. So when we go to God with a request, let me ask you, how soon do you expect an answer? How soon do you expect? How patient are you? How do you inquire? Because David's lesson is our lesson today. How do you inquire of the Lord and get what you need and know that that's the answer? Anyone?
Ideally, I exercise patience.
Okay.
Yes, I would like to have that type of relationship that I ask and I get immediately.
Okay.
And
patience. That's what I have here. Okay.
Yes, that's ideal. But
that's ideal.
Realistically, we ask and we want an answer immediately. But what I do, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, is I do ask, but then I look. I do look I look for the answer.
That's good.
So
That's
whether
good.
looking
So,
is patience or impatience, I'm not sure. But I am active. Once I ask for it, I am actively looking and expecting a response.
six in one hand, half a dozen in the other. You're longing for an answer. Are we repetitious? I would say many of us are. Have we learned as we age not to use vain repetition? I would say yes, because that doesn't necessarily bring the answer closer to us. You know, when we're cooking, if we watch the pot, I mean, unless you have to really stir the pot, it's a forever process. So in our prayer, we're asking, we're seeking, we're knocking. And we're trying very carefully not to be a whiner or a crier about it, but to trust. The key word here. Stick to it, not strike out on our own thinking, okay, you know, moving too quickly, because David is not moving too quickly here. After this grief, David is being very careful. So God's written and completed word, you know, I asked the question, what do we have today that David did not have? Any answers? What do we have today?
I believe we have God's word.
That's correct, Deacon. We do
And
have.
it's available to everybody.
It's in so many different languages. It can be read. You can audio. You can sign it. We have God's completed word through His scriptures, and we learn to listen.
Also, Pastor, we can pray, and that's still okay. But God will answer in His time, because sometimes He has to get the other. If we're praying about people, He has to get them together or the situation together. And then we can receive that prayer and know that He's answered it.
That's correct. That's a part of the steps, Deacon. You know, I was going to ask you, are there steps that you've learned that can be taught to others on how to ask, how to inquire of the Lord for a specific need? And in actuality, we have to acknowledge what your need is, be specific. We have to pray daily, pray. We have to ask for God's help in recognizing what it is He wants. And then it's okay to, Lord, I'm asking for confirmation. There are numerous places in the Bible where confirmation was asked. When a fleece was used, you know, I gotta know that I know. So when we think of Moses, what did Moses do? He sensed that God was leading him and the children of Israel towards Canaan, and he needed to know. He needed to know. So it saves us a lot of trouble, and it helps us to not get in front of what God's plan is for us. All righty. 3 and 4, 5 and 6. And David sent messengers unto the men of Jabesh Gilead, and said unto them, Blessed be ye the Lord, that ye have shown this kindness unto the Lord, even unto Saul, and have buried him. It's really a disrespect to not bury. It's inhumane, you know, in our world today, all of the inhumanity of bombing and kids starving. It's inhumane. And it's not any different today than it was back then. And now the Lord showed kindness and truth unto you, and I also will requite you for this kindness because you have done this. David in Hebron, getting settled. And to settle means to rest, to pause, to stop. David and his men, each of his households, are getting situated. And David hears that the men of Jabesh Gilead treated Saul and his sons kindly, favored, making sure that they were buried, because the embarrassment to be left out in the wilderness for people to spectate, that's not deserving of a king. It just simply isn't. And so David made sure that he sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead. That was really one of the first acts, because here, going back to 4, what happened? And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. Wait a minute, shouldn't he be over the house of Israel? Isn't that what the word says? He's supposed to be over the house of Israel? What happened? What's going on? David's not moving too quickly. God instructed David to go to Hebron, a region in biblical history very rich, and it's the beginning of what lies ahead. When David was a teen, he was anointed. God told him he would be. Well, look what has transpired from the teen years to where he is today. David's about what? How old is David? As I said, we recall when Samuel went to Jesse's house and he was anointed as a teen. So David is now how old?
Is he about 30?
Yeah, that's what I was
Yes,
gonna say.
sir. That's it. He is 30 years of age. A lot has transpired. I mean, we just ended the book of 1 Samuel, and I mean, it was a roller coaster of events. But now David is 30 years of age. And the men of Jabesh Gilead, which he has a history, Saul had a history with Jabesh Gilead. Does anyone remember why they're important? Why they would even be acknowledged by David? Anyone remember? What did Saul do back then? Anyone recall how the people were spared, saved?
He fought.
Anyone
When he fought the Philistines. I can't think of his name. And killed
You're on the right track.
Goliath.
Definitely.
Goliath. Yeah.
On the right track. The men of, yeah. Okay. Anything else anyone want to add? Because these people, this group of people are being acknowledged after this anointing. This, by the way, is the second anointing. First, when he was a king, the second anointing, now King David over the house of Judah, not Israel, not yet. He didn't bombard and go through, okay, now, hey, Saul's dead. This man lamented over the death of Saul and his sons and grieved sincerely. Now is in a position to show out, but he's not. Being very careful here how he moves. his first diplomatic job or task was to send a message to the men of Jabesh Gilead and let them know that they showed kindness, and he blesses. Blessed be the Lord that you've shown kindness unto the Lord, even unto Saul, and have buried him. And now show kindness and truth. He is being very diplomatic because they've lost their king. They don't have to show allegiance to David, but it's like an extension of a palm because he wants them to know that he appreciates them and that this thing that they've done will not be overlooked. So he is saying to them, therefore, now, let your hands be made strong, strengthened, and be ye valiant, for your master Saul is dead. Also the house of Judah have anointed me king. So he's letting them know this is what has transpired. Here is where I am. And that's so important. When you think of people and events, again, he's in Hebron. Abraham settled there. Joshua gave Hebron to Caleb as an inheritance. It's an important place. And David now and his family are there. And David, the plunder, remember the plunder from Ziklag? Some of that plunder went to places in Judah. People that were his friends. It's like he spreaded the wealth. And that's important because spreading the plunder, even if I'm an enemy of yours, I feel a little more kind-hearted towards you because you shared something that you didn't have to share. Does that make sense? So David, who's been on the move, who now is being comforted by his God, who is now being very careful what he does. He went through a private anointing, now a public anointing, and now he is king over Judah, not Israel. That means that Abner, you know, David embarrassed Abner. David called him out. David is not Abner's best friend. Abner, the son of Ner, the captain of Saul, took the youngest child, the living son, the only son living, and he appointed Abishai, the son of Saul, over Israel.
Hey,
Abner's
Pastor, I'm sorry.
What's that?
Now, this Abner, they weren't able to accept, I don't believe, David over the whole kingdom, Israel, period. So here's what
Absolutely.
I guess Abner just figured he could go and keep, you know, Saul, just keeping that thing about Saul and take one of his sons and make him king, but he wasn't supposed to make nobody king because nobody asked the Lord yet.
That is correct. And that takes me to this map here. Thank you, Deke. You see that land in blue? The two kingdoms. The kingdom of Israel. Can you see it? Did my screen advance? Are you all able to see it? Hello?
Yes,
I see it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you see this, David's kingdom over Judah is moving as unto the Lord. Abner took the initiative. Abner, who is powerful, because Abner, you might even say, I mean, he sat next to Saul at supper. He was faithful to Saul. He was even more faithful than Jonathan. Jonathan believed that David was going to be king. Saul had, and by the way, Abner's the cousin of Saul and the captain of the host. He is the one that decided. He made the decision. He's jockeying for power, wouldn't you say? So he appoints Mephibosheth, Ishbosheth, also known as Ishbah. The name means shame, but he appointed him over Israel. And of course, he undergirds the way things are going to run. Ishbosheth is a weak. He's somewhat weak, and Abner knows that. Nevertheless, those boundaries, he's making a statement, because here again, Abner is someone that feels he has power. He's been a captain for a number of years, and he and David don't have a really good relationship. Remember when David called out, "Are you not a man? Why have you not guarded the Lord your king, the king?" And they told him, King David now, telling, at the time he said, David said, "You deserve to die." So when you have that kind of feeling mixed, you're not going to feel real good about that. So you make your own moves. And here's the contrast. David is being methodical and inquiring of the Lord. Abner's just making moves. And what happens when you do things outside of the will of the Lord? You usually fall flat on your face. But I can't get ahead, can't get ahead. So Abner, I'm at verse 9, and made him king over Gilead and over the Asherites and over Jezreel and over Ephraim, and over Benjamin and over all Israel. This is what Abner did. This is what he appointed Ishbosheth as king, wanted him over Israel. And that land eventually will belong to David. But right now, he's saying, you and I have a problem. There will be a clash. And of course, into the next section, you're going to talk about that war. So David, it says, there's a discrepancy here about Ishbosheth being 40 years old and reigning 2 years over, and David, the house of Judah, 2 years, and David reigning 7 years and 6 months, and Ishbosheth reigning 2 years. And the discrepancy I read, and I want to read this to you because I'm trying to figure out how is this? And it says here that Ishbosheth was 47.5 years in terms of reigning. The number for Ishbosheth's age and how long he ruled are puzzling. He apparently did not fight at the Battle of Gilboa, which could mean he was too young to fight. But if he was too young, he could not have been 40 when he became king. David and Ishbosheth both became kings after Saul's death. This means, or that meant, that Ishbosheth and David would have ruled separately for about the same length of time, about 7.5 years. David ruled in Hebron for 7.5 years, but some of that time might have been as king of all Israel. Did anybody find anything different? That's all I could find, because there seemed to have been a discrepancy. And I was trying to do the math. Anyone?
No, that's a great question because I was wondering what happened in the, call it, 5 years
Yeah,
between
yeah,
those two.
between those two. And so with Abner being more powerful, it is very possible, that at that time, his responsibilities, that he stepped into that role. So, as I said, Abner did have real power and operated in such a way that wasn't as unto the Lord. But here again, the Lord is ordering this. He sees, he never sleeps, he never slumbers, he sees it all. So whether he was younger or not, that 2-year period is what he ruled. And it appears that gap that he ruled over the northern kingdom, that they weren't without a king. Someone had to do that. So, and the time that David was king in Hebron, over the house of Judah, 7 years, 6 months, David was 30 when he began his reign. And what lies on the other side of verse 11 is going to be interesting. It's interesting because we see God working. We see God moving. So this really concludes our study of the first 11 verses. Come back again on next week to get the rest of the story. Are there any questions that you would like to ask or add? I had a lot of
Pat,
bumps
I
in the
believe,
road.
yeah, hello, Pastor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
David had just 2 tribes, and it was Judah and Simeon, and then Ispa, I can't pronounce that name, he had the other 10 tribes. So he's trying to be king over 10 tribes, and David is king. He's over the 2 tribes that he was with right there. Okay.
But it's, yes. I hear you. I hear you, Deke. Here again, David didn't come in and flex his muscles. He could have took it all right up front. That's not what God had him to do. After all this time, he's still waiting patiently to take the throne, to be crowned king over all of Israel. This step, this pause, this settling in, perfect. It's perfect. And it's applicable to us for understanding how sometimes we just run and run and run. And sometimes we get in front of what we should be, and then we get frustrated. And then we got to go back and almost learn the lesson all over again. I'm applauding the lesson that I'm learning from David for, here again, that word settle, pausing, rest, and letting God lead him, because each step of the road, each turn in the wilderness, all of that has led up to this time. And it's all for good. All of this bad, all of the hunting, all of the times when he could have took Saul's life, even in death, David appreciated, admonished a king that he could have took out on 2 occasions. The amount of respect for leadership, I can't even say, somebody's going, they want to kill me and I'm still respecting them. It's admirable beyond what you would have imagined, which speaks to how people on our jobs, it's nothing compared to what we go through. If God has me, He's more than the world against me. That's his word. Please join us next week for the rest of the story. Are there any prayer requests?